this is Ben here with the PointByPatrol. Today we're going to be talking about brakes. So I wore my brake pads out at the last track event. I actually went through two sets. I went through a set of Paragon R7s in a day, and then I swapped them for some used Rotor DS312s that lasted me the remainder of the weekend. So while I do praise Paragon for the outstanding bite and modulation, they just didn't hold up. The brake pads are getting to, or rather the rotors are getting to about 1500 degrees, which is really, really hot, and those brake pads just can't stand up to that heat. So let's go ahead and get started here, and I'll show you what we're going to do. Okay, so we have the car prepared. We've got the wheel off. I've turned the wheel so that it's easier to see what I'm doing here. AP racing makes it really easy to change brake pads. The biggest thing that you're going to fight here is pushing the pistons back. So first things first, you need to make sure that your brake fluid reservoir cap is removed. I've already got that done. So in addition to changing the brakes, I am also going to be removing this caliper and inspecting the back side of the rotor for any kind of cracking. So it already has a lot of what would appear to be cracks on the face of it. These are not actually called cracks, they're called checks. Cracks are, you know, very large checks that go all the way through the rotor surface. So once those basically break the rotor from its front face to the inside face in the vanes, it's no longer a serviceable rotor. Now these are pretty grooved just from the use that I've got on them, which will make it slightly harder to bed in pads, but I don't want to replace these if I don't have to because they're expensive. Consumables, meaning brake pads, rotors, and tires, those costs can skyrocket exponentially the more that you get your car to the track, and you really need to keep check of, you know, the condition of things, how much use you can get out of them so that you can stretch every penny that you can. So first we're just going to start by removing these two Allen bolts. These are 6mm. You'll see these fall out, no big deal. These are just holding the pads down. These are not the anti-squeal shims, by the way. They do sell a set of anti-squeal shims that basically has rubber padding here that forces the pad down. So what you experience when you're just driving around town with these, you will hear pad rattle, and it takes a little while to get used to, but it's nothing to be, you know, afraid of. So we're going to start by pushing this back by hand. It gives me a little bit of wiggle here. And then we're going to get a flathead screwdriver, and we can kind of work the pad back. You don't want to press against this center area. There's no reason to bend that if you can help it. So you can get in here, you can kind of start working the pad backwards. The pads also work really well as a pry tool. And who cares, since they're worn out, it's not like you're going to use them again. So either way, we're going to push these back. Keep in mind, since this is a 6-piston, when you push one in, the one on the bottom wants to come out, so you kind of have to work it in sections. But either way, we can remove this pad now for inspection. As you'll notice here, I'm using a Paragon titanium shim. What this does is it really helps keep the heat in the pad and out of the caliper. I recommend this for the factory brake system as well. I do believe that Paragon makes titanium shims for the factory Brembo calipers, but I also want to point out that Hell Performance makes carbon fiber brake pad shims that work on the factory brakes on the FL5 Type R. So you can purchase a set of these too. They make them for front and rear, but these will not fit some aftermarket pads and are only designed for use with the factory calipers. So that's the remaining surface. This is around about 2mm that I had remaining on these used Rotor DS312s. And just for cross comparison here, this is what a new set looks like. A lot more material there. These are 18 millimeters thick. I really wish that I could have fit the caliper that holds the 25 millimeter brake pads, because they just last forever. Now, this is going to last a long time too, but we're not going to install these yet. We're going to get this backside out, push those back, then we're going to remove this caliper and then remove the rotor so that I can inspect the rear face. Also, one thing to note, keep an eye on your brake fluid level, because it's going to rise as you push these pistons back. So I have a Mighty Vac ready to rock and roll just in case it looks like it's going to come over the brim of the brake fluid reservoir. These actually have a little bit more meat on them than the other ones do, but we're still going to go ahead and retire these. Okay, now we're going to get the caliper off. I'm going to move the camera here because it's in my way. You guys can still see in there while I'm working. It's 2 7/8 bolts. And they are tight. This really doesn't feel good because I'm recovering from a shoulder injury, but I can't let that slow me down. Got a track event coming up this weekend and the car's got to be ready. So before you get that all the way out, go ahead and crack the top one. I'm going to pause here for a second because my brake line is in the way. I'm going to have to get an extension so that I can get in there without upsetting this brake line. All right, so I'm back with you. Got the extension on here. I went ahead and cracked it loose off camera because I had to put my body weight into it. I put Loctite on these, a little bit of dab of thread locker red. The last thing you want is your caliper to come loose while you're on the track. That'd be bad news bears, and you'd probably end up in the tire wall somewhere. There it is. You can see evidence of some thread locker red. I can smell it too. Sweet smell to it. That's because it's made with sugar. Sugar gets hard and sticky. It sticks to the threads and helps keep stuff from coming loose that you don't want coming loose. All right, so we've got that off. Now the reason that I went for those back here instead of these is because these are nylon lock nuts and I just don't want to upset them. They're torqued to spec. I see no reason to make them angry. So I'm gonna try to find a spot to prop this, and worst case scenario I'll get a zip tie and zip tie it to the coil here so that this thing isn't just flopping around. So let me run, grab a zip tie. I'm going to hang this back in place for just a second while I find something to hold it up with, and we'll continue. All right, so we did some off-camera magic here and hung that out of the way. So we're going to bring the camera around to to the face of the rotor so that you can see how that's removed. Oh, that was a pain in the ass. Probably stuck from all the heat. They're usually not that hard. All right, let's take a look. Right. Not seeing anything immediately. You'll know it when you see it. You'll see some crazy cracks. But I don't see any. They definitely saw some wear and tear on the inside here though. But they're still good. That's great news. That saves me a bunch of money because these rings are pretty expensive and you got to buy new hardware each time. Either way, I'm happy with that. Put that back on. Murdered the shit out of this set screw. It'll be all right. They don't have to be overly tight going on at all. So we're gonna go ahead and put the caliper back on. All right, so I'm going to reapply just a dab. Don't overdo this. I mean, just a drop of this stuff on each bolt here. That's all I'm applying, and it's more than enough. All right, got those started by hand. See if I can't use a little drill action here, just so that I'm not using the ratchet as long. All right, that was definitely a time saver. And these need to be fairly tight. You know, I like them nice and snug. Loctite will do the rest. All right, I'm happy with that. So now, starting in the back, I'm going to use the old pad here to press in the rest of these pistons so that I can fit the new pad. So I'm going to move this so you can see what I'm doing. All right, let's see if that's enough room. Be sure to reapply your shim as well. This one I can tell, let's see here, goes to the back side, size of the pistons. If it fits, it ships. Hopefully it fits. Hopefully I've got enough room. Well, I've got enough room without the shim currently. Should be able to slide it in there. It's a little bit warped. There we go. All right, shim and pad in place. We're gonna do the same thing on this. Meanwhile, keeping an eye on our brake fluid level, which is rapidly climbing, but not high enough that I really need to be worried about it just yet. So it's like playing whack-a-mole. Got our other pad here. Got our shim. All right, shim's in place, pads are in place. All we got to do is reassemble now. Easy enough. You can use a little thread locker blue on these if you choose to. I choose not to. This is an aluminum caliper, so you got to be really careful with these threads. If you over tighten this, you can strip them out, and I feel like they're not really experiencing enough load, really, since all they're doing is just holding these in to really need that. So I just make them gently snug by hand. And call it good on that. There, it's like snug plus a quarter turn. It's right there, snug, quarter turn. And that's it. That's how you replace the brake pads on these and how you do a rotor inspection. And one big thing that I actually wanted to bring up in this video was go fast modifications versus braking modifications. Everybody wants to be faster on track. To me, one of the biggest things to make you faster on track is better brakes. I'm not saying you need to go out and buy an AP racing brake kit like I did. Do these help? Absolutely. Are the factory calipers good? Is the factory brake system good? Yes, it's reasonably good, and with the right pads, it's very effective. This is just a lot more stopping power since I have 2 extra pistons per side. I have a larger rotor, which allows even faster braking, harder braking, can handle higher temperatures. The vanes inside of this are large, you can see in here, for air dispersion so that they cool down. Especially if you're going down the front straight or something like that, back straight, it doesn't matter. It's really helping to cool these brakes before you load back up on them. But brakes in general make you faster on track. If I can brake harder and later, then I do not generate as much heat as it takes to, say with the factory caliper, I have to brake sooner and longer as that would develop. So sooner and longer is a lot more temperature than harder and faster. I'm off the brakes quicker with these, I'm back on the gas quicker with these, and when you're back on the gas, these are cooling down. So that's why riding the brakes causes warpages, it's why it wears your pads out even faster, and so when you're stopping at the 5 marker all the way to the 1 instead of the 3 marker and all the way to the 1, think about all of that extra distance that you're using your brakes for and how much hotter they could potentially be because of it. So yes, brakes will make you faster on track because you can brake later, you can brake harder, and then you can get off of the brakes and back on the gas faster. So that was the biggest thing that I wanted to bring up. My FL5 doesn't really have that many power modifications. It's still on a factory tune. I had the PRL intercooler, that's great. I've got a PRL downpipe installed on it, sure, that's great. But it's still on the factory tune, which means that I'm not really doing much to take advantage of those modifications at all. Sure, I could exploit those modifications and be faster on the straights, and one day we'll probably do that, and I do have the brakes to back that up. But if you're adding a whole bunch of power modifications and you're still on the factory brake system, you're gonna realize what your limitations are real fast. This is the most important thing. Brakes and tires and brake fluid, and obviously stainless steel brake lines are the most important things that you should do to your car before you go out on track ever. I think any expert would agree with me on that, and that's what I do on any car that I've taken to the track. That's the first thing that I do before I start doing a whole bunch of tuning, big turbos, you know, full exhaust or anything like that. So I hope this video has been helpful. I'm going to go ahead and get started on the other side here and get this side reassembled. I do appreciate you watching. Don't forget to like and subscribe. Again, this has Ben with the PointByPatrol. You guys have a great day and happy wrenching. Let's also talk about bedding in your pads for the best wear and performance out of them. So in my specific situation, I'm using used rotors, and those rotors are already grooved. As you can see on these used brake pads where the grooves exist, those do not exist on the brand new brake pads. That means that I'm going to have to be extra careful when I bed these in. So what I do is I usually run up to 60 miles an hour. I step on the brakes. Now I only do it at 50% of how hard I would step on them at the track, which is still pretty darn hard. And I'm going to do that anywhere from 10 to 15 times. And I know that I'm done when I can really start smelling the brakes burning off and they've got a good heat cycle in them. And then I bring the car back. I don't drive it anymore until the brakes have completely cooled off. If you were, for example, doing this on a fresh set of rotors that are not burnished, and burnishing is a service that AP Racing, for example, offers. Basically what they do is they put the rotor in a lathe, for better lack of a word, or basically a rotor dyno, and they'll clamp pads as they're rotating this thing so that the pad material actually burnishes into the rotor face. That makes it significantly easier just to swap your rotor, swap your pads, jump back on track, because you don't really have to break them in. If, for example, you buy non-burnished rotors, the break-in period is really important, and it could take you anywhere from 30 to 40 times on a fresh set of rotors to really get the pads to wear into the steel face of the rotor itself. But in my case, again, this is going to be a little bit different for me since I'm on used rotors. They're basically already pre-burnished with Ferroto material, so it's not going to take me as long. The biggest thing that I need to be cautious of is that they're getting worn into the grooves of the rotor, and you don't want to go out there full track force doing that, because basically what will happen is you'll boil gas pockets inside of the brake pad itself, and it'll fragment. You'll actually lose pieces rather than them wearing to the actual face of the rotor itself. So you got to be careful with that. It's a balancing act. So in my case, I'm going to be easy on it. I'll likely only do it 10 to 15 times, and then I'm going to drive the car throughout the week. It is my daily driver, so I'll take it to work and that sort of thing, and that allows these pads to experience a couple of heat cycles. I'm also going to drive up to the track on the same pads. So important lesson for everybody to learn and to know is obviously how to get these to mate to your rotors properly.